Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me again today. Today we are speaking with master storyteller Carla Sorey Reed, who is CEO of Reed and Associates. She is a speaker coach where she works with top-level tech executives, musicians, artists, performers, TED talkers, and she also started her career as an actress in New York City. She is a former host for two different television stations in the San Francisco Bay Area, KRON and KGO Television. And she's currently authoring a book, which I'm super excited to talk with her about today.
Woo!
Yes. And she also has a nonprofit, Women Uninterrupted, that aims to empower women in leadership through storytelling. So without further ado, Miss Carla Sorey Reed, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Sunday. Well as can be expected under everything we're all trying to manage, right? But
Yes.
this is a good day. I thank you for inviting me on your interview show, and I'm excited about it. We have a new neighbor that introduced himself this morning. He's a rooster. And I'm not sure where he comes from, but if he's in the background, I'm still in Oakland, California. I haven't moved to my grandparents' farm, but yeah, he's here.
Okay. Awesome. No worries about that. And so I just kind of wanted to get started because how do you explain to people what a speaker coach is? Or is that even how you explain what you do to people?
You know what, Cindy, that's a great first question, because my father, even after I coached at the convention, the DNC convention in 2016, he was like, Cookie, he calls me Cookie. He was, Cookie, so exactly what were you doing? It is a little confusing because people think speaking is talking. We all do it every day. And how do you coach it? And there is this idea that there are natural public speakers. I don't buy into the idea of there being natural public speakers. I'm getting to answer your question, but this is all part and parcel of it. It's the more you work at it, it is a practice. And the people who we call natural public speakers, usually if you were to go to YouTube and look for any of your favorite speakers and look at some of their early speeches, you'll see they weren't so natural.
Yeah.
They did it. There is practicing. There is coaching to it. It's based on some of these skills go way back. I mean, they're literally primal, like eye contact, gesturing. Gesturing actually was the first language before verbal language. And then we had to hold things, a club. And now we hold, back in the caveman days, we were holding a club. Now we're holding coffee and a cell phone. So our gestures, all of these things, and now on Zoom, that's a whole other thing. But so what I coach is from basic, and this is my idea of it, is that we all have the behaviors. In what I coach is managing them skillfully when you're in a public arena. So I'm a speaker, press, and media coach. My core business was in person. It is now, like everything else, pivoted to virtual. And the likes of what we're doing here, interviews, what's interesting is this is my very first interview where I'm the subject.
And just as you mentioned, adapting right now during this time with the pandemic and everything going virtually, I was thinking about your start as an actress in New York City and leading up to where you are today and the work that you're doing today. So talk to me a little bit about that journey and the transition of like learning to be agile and adapting yourself and kind of evolving into from acting and performing and being on stage and now coaching other people through it.
Right. I did start as an actress. My degree was in performance. I went to New York. That's very much what I started in. I actually went from Northwestern to Circle in the Square because I transferred into theater, and I have an interdepartmental degree from Northwestern in theater and oral interpretation. And oral interpretation, even when I was there so many years ago, sounded really old-fashioned, like my classmate was Cicero or something. I sat right next to Marcus Cicero. But what that really was, and it all has really helped me in the longevity of my career and the different things I've done. But I went to New York, as you said. Yeah. Theater is very fourth wall, right? It's you have your own world, whether it's on film or theater. You're acting, you have a script. You're not playing off of, you're not relying on the feedback from the audience. Okay. So when we moved to the West Coast, there was a real advantage in that for me, because while I was in New York, I had a hankering, for lack of a better word, to try broadcast journalism. I was really Sue Simmons. I just thought she was amazing as a news anchor. I watched her every night. I loved what she did. I loved the transparency of broadcasting, as opposed to always having, and there's a whole lot behind acting too, where as a Black actress during this time, there were lots of limitations in the roles you were offered and what the expectations were of these roles. And it seemed like broadcast journalists were farther along in the game. I was very advantaged when I moved from New York to the Bay Area with a very strong resume in acting, got an agent in the Bay Area. And because it's a secondary market, and this is something people really should think about, they didn't have the same line. In New York, you can't talk about being an actress and a broadcast journalist. It's the number one market in the country.
Right.
You're one or the other, and you can't get much attention or interest doing that because it sounds like you're not focused. Whereas when you come to a secondary market, not so much. At all of these auditions, you see a big crossover. Models are in there with you, actors, broadcasters. I was very fortunate. My very first audition, I came out with an infant. My son was 8 months old. Right when I decided to get back in the game, I got my agent, J.E. Talent, who for local things I still work with. And my first audition was the nighttime, a live entertainment talk show. And I got it. I was thrilled, and I absolutely loved it. Just loved it. So, and went from there, did another show, the first technology talk show in the Bay Area, actually, Log On TV. Co-hosted that with Don Blue. Both places, again, because they were a small market, I got the opportunity, because I was the host / anchor, to produce some of my segments. All right. So the critical time frame of TV, 3 to 5 minutes. People have to bring it, right? They have to, whether they're talking about themselves or their latest whiz bang, they've got to bring it. And because it was my show, I was very vested in their performance.
Yeah.
Right? So I ended up doing a lot of coaching. And I realized, wait, I really like this. I'm really, I feel like I have both. I felt like I had an ability and an affinity for it. And that made all the difference in the world. You feel strange when you say these things, they seem kind of lofty, but it did feel like a calling. And I switched with Log On TV, which was interviewing technology people. I got an opportunity, actually, this wasn't technology, though Charles Schwab at the time, it was right before, in the .com era, they were doing a lot of investments in technology, and he was really doing some very creative things online. And I got in with them as both a producer and executive coach, went from there to technologists, MuleSoft, which is a Salesforce company. And I also, though, I want to add to your list, I work with activists as well. And I work with NGOs. One of my clients, which right now, I wouldn't leave them off of any list, is the NEA, which is the largest labor union and the teachers union. And they're going through a lot right now. But they're leading with their voices, and that's what I'm all about.
I love it. And I love to, I think, as a reporter in the industry, working for myself, even in local news, I hear so many stories about people who kind of do that same thing, that ebb and flow, kind of in and out of the industry. And I'm always encouraging people to look at our skill sets. Our skill sets are so broad and so diverse, and they're so adaptable to so many different spaces. And so looking at your passions and looking at the things that you're interested in and learning how to adapt, I think is crucial. And someone actually, an executive at ESPN had shared that with me once. She shared that, she said, journalism in the traditional formats of print or television, are sort of becoming obsolete slowly but surely. I mean, there are some organizations that will probably be around for forever, but it's just not what it used to be. And so she really encouraged me to look at our journalism skill sets and storytelling skill sets for the diversity that it is, and all the different facets that it can apply to in corporate or starting your own business, et cetera. So I think you're an excellent example of that, which is why I really want to focus on the storytelling piece, because that's the thread, I think, through your career is really growing and evolving as a storyteller, from being on stage performance, to doing television, to coaching other people for their on stage moment.
Absolutely.
Absolutely incredible, for sure.
Yes.
And I definitely want to make sure we talk about your book before we wrap things up. So tell us about your project that you've been working on.
Thank you. Again, the pandemic came along. I had a match made in heaven with, I identified a team of agents, Esther Newberg and Kristen Keen Benton. And we had a great phone call. And when you're doing nonfiction, I didn't know this until I set about to write this book. I didn't know that you have to write a proposal, which with fiction, you write the book and then you go look to get it published. With nonfiction, you basically write this outline. It's very detailed outline. It's proposal writing. To me, it's like grant writing. It's a whole different thing from the actual writing of the book. So I wrote the proposal. They liked it very much. We were well on our way. This is the end of January. Mind you, this was a book called Speak. I'm a public speaking coach. Along comes the coronavirus pandemic. All things public go right out the window. I mean, within 3 days, my entire calendar was clear. I had conventions, trade conferences, technology conferences, the DNC convention, which was the last to fall off the calendar because we weren't sure everybody was hopeful that people would be able to gather in person. And my book, which was the core meat of it, was in-person public speaking. All of a sudden, I couldn't write it anymore. I just could not write it. So I told my editor, a private editor that I work with, I said, I have to write a preface or something to explain this, what the environment is like now to even get back into it. Wrote that, and in the writing of that decided, I just have to write a whole new book. So now I'm writing a book called The Virtual Speaker, because there's an interesting thing that happened when this all happened. The bar of public speaking, which had been very high for so long, in terms of the value proposition, not so high that, anybody who didn't want to couldn't do it, but just in terms of how important it was. Shift it like that, where the in-person public speaking went to the ceiling for all kinds of safety, just basically went out of view, right? And then though also the other half of it fell to the ground because in came Zoom, thankfully, and the technology was easy, and everybody assumed, everybody started up, we were so happy to be connected, that the idea of skill behind what you were doing, just nobody even thought about it. I had to kind of rework my whole value proposition to my clients, because now people are much less tolerant of the public speaking when people are really presenting, when there's real, not just a social equation, not a family gathering, but when Zoom is being used for business activism, it's gotten a higher level. But before, it was so easy that everybody just was like, sit down, push the button, and let Zoom do the work of it, right? Yeah. So my new book, The Virtual Speaker, is about how taking those same skills, eye contact is still important. It's impossible. Now, true eye contact, but there are strategies. There are strategies that you use for it, because the thing about virtual speaking is, if you're speaking to a group, it's one thing if you have a gallery, but if you're speaking, like right now I'm doing this, I'm on my second very large event where the numbers are there, but we don't know that they're not hiding or looking at their email. So you still want, and we're working to do this. So there are different strategies now for holding an audience and getting them back, so it's a different dynamic. I'm really enjoying it because I learned something new. Like even right here, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this, that, the other. But so that's what the book is about. The book is The Virtual Speaker, First Be Human. Because I also have very real concerns, because I've been watching the technology, because I'm a little bit of a geek in this respect, and I'm fearful that the technology is going to go in the wrong direction, meaning that instead of helping us to bring back some of our more human attributes into the virtual atmosphere, we're going to have a lot of artificial intelligence. I've already read something where they're going to be scans able to tell the speaker, like read you and say like a note, like Sunday Eli disinterested, like all these sort of facial emotive sort of things. Yes. Wow. And I'm really concerned about that.
Yeah.
Because in the way technology moves, I mean, look right now, Zoom's out ahead of everybody. Every day we read that Microsoft did something, Google Meet did something, because they're all trying to get this audience. Because we know in-person speaking's coming back. It hasn't gone away forever. I mean, we've seen the imperative for it with the protest marches. Public health, public communication is public health, right? We've seen that work, we've seen it go off the rails, right? So in-person speaking is definitely not gone away. Virtual speaking is not going to go away either. I am afraid that because virtual speaking, that the technologists in their efforts to give us so many features, that we're going to drift from the humanity of it, because it's already very difficult. You know, when I coach people now, they're in a room by themselves. We're sending full kits of how to do it. You may be doing this too in your world when you're doing interviews. We're sending full kits. At first it was with laptops. Now it's a little bit simpler because we're using iPhones. They're in these rooms by themselves. They have to be their crew. We're sending them a green screen. They have to do the tripod. They get a little light. I mean, it's simplified, but basically they set it up. But where I really feel for them is when they're working, they're not getting any. I mean, we're there on the screen. We come in, you know, we have one person who kind of talks to them. It's so different. It's already so isolated that I worry that if we take that too far in that direction, it's going to be hard to bring it back.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And I can tell you, just amongst my peers, that are in the media industry and everything, this being home for so many months and just everything, I think everyone's feeling that impact of the lack of community. It doesn't feel organic to the human nature. We are communal in that sense.
Right.
And so I love, even though your plans got shifted, I think for everything that we're dealing with today, I think that that's awesome and dynamic, because you're able to, I feel like, be on the forefront of a conversation and possibly help steer it, you know, in the right direction, which is awesome.
I hope so.
Yeah.
You know, really, I really do hope so, because this is why I have the urgency in getting the book out. It really is all about this. I mean, there are things right now that there's certain video conferencing platforms that have a bias to, when you're in a group, in a gallery, like in, you know, in an organizational meeting, classroom setting, that have a bias to volume and first. So now imagine if that was really happening in a classroom or in any sort of setting, that the first person who spoke up, that was me, but who's, you know, always hand up, or the person who was louder, got in first, because there are people who are shy. Mm-hmm. There are people who are thinkers, mm-hmm. who process things more slowly and kind of they just don't work that way, of the aggression of trying to get into the conversation. And then there are people who've been marginalized for a while, that women, minorities and whatever, when you think about in the room, them getting into the conversation. And this is why if the technology continues to drift to things like that, biases of volume and first, mm-hmm. it's not a good thing, you know? Yeah.
I hear that. And so lastly, because I don't want to take too much of your time, if there are ways for people to get in contact with you, either social or your website, how can they do that?
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So let me think. I believe I am at Sorey Reed on Instagram. Yes. You can certainly find out on LinkedIn. I'm Carla Sorey Reed. You can always start there, message me. Lots of people do. And my organization is Women Uninterrupted. You can find me there too. We have a contact page. So any of those places. And I'd love to hear from you. I'm really interested. If anybody has listened to this and has something that they just want to talk to me about, I am writing a book. I welcome the conversation. So do reach out to me. The best place for that is probably LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carla, for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. Great conversation as always.
Thank you, Cindy.